You can see it all over the
So exactly.
And I have one.
Which warrants?
Are there, Rachel, are the warrants in the folder?
There are no warrants.
And also, there was it's principal report tonight, so director reports.
Okay, yeah.
If I don't return, I hope.
And there are no co-curricular nominations.
Was I over the line? Okay, because
I have it's a little after 6. Everybody ready to start?
You bet.
Go ahead and call the meeting to order. Would all who wish join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So nice to have people here.
I know, great. Starting to turn into a happy meeting.
Jason.
I would make a motion to adjust the agenda to add 3 items. 8AI1, adding the speech language pathologist position. 8BI, a policy for revision, and 8C, which would be a change in a staffing allocation, not a hire. Any further discussion or other agenda adjustments? All those in favor of those changes? Okay. That passes 5-0. I would make a motion to adopt the minutes of May 31st as presented. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion or corrections? All those in favor? Okay, passes 5-0. Next up is public comment. Would anybody like to make a public comment? Let's see a large number of public on Zoom, but floor is open for public comment. Okay, last call for public comment. We'll go ahead and move on to acknowledgements. Jake?
nothing at this time.
I guess I'd just like to make an acknowledgement. I've been having a lot of conversations with colleagues around the nation this past couple months. And how many districts really through COVID, the administration and the unions got at loggerheads with each other and the schools were closed for kids for much longer. So I'd just like to express gratitude and appreciation for the good relationship with the union and the fact that we were all able to work together and, you know, do it safely, of course, but get the schools open for kids to a much greater degree. I have friends who, you know, had a whole year remote last year. And so just really, and I, you know, in particular, you know, lots of people work to make that happen, but I really like to express appreciation to the union for working with, communicating and trusting through that process to make that happen. Kevin, any acknowledgements?
I guess I was thinking about, I actually want to thank you guys and Meredith for, I just feel like I've come in with a lot of like last week, like getting very into some of these debates and exploring some of these ideas. And And I just feel like you've taken it really well, like my sort of Jewish argumentative streak. And like, you know, and I think that I really appreciate your leadership and everybody's insight. And I was just thinking last week, I came in and just started articulating a perspective that I felt needed to be articulated. And by the end of the meeting, I feel like I left much more believing your perspective. And so I just feel like I'm learning a lot, and I appreciate your willingness to engage and help me.
Mark,
I have nothing at this time, thank you.
Eric,
Mine's related to Brian's, but kind of more broadly, as we approach the end of the school year, we won't meet again until after we finish this school year. It just feels again like something worth celebrating, and just congratulating everyone on a successful year, students and their resilience, you know, staff and their, you know, just hanging in there and giving it their all, and parents in the community for, you know, being partners with us through uncertain times and trusting and supporting. So I feel like, as Brian said, some communities fracture in these moments, and I think ours has done the opposite. And it's really, you know, for the benefit of our mission, our students and the children that we serve every day. And I had the benefit of being down at Asa yesterday, and it was, you know, there are meaningful, powerful lessons and instruction happening every day in, you know, small, quiet ways that don't often get noticed or talked about. But it's been that kind of year for our students, and in other places where instruction has felt, you know, impacted yet again by COVID this year, I don't think that our students have felt that this year. So it feels like something that should be celebrated and congratulated that we got to this point, and only had 2 really lost days, and that was due to something that was not COVID. So that's worth celebrating. And I guess I count the board in talking about the community. The board has really also been a big part of our success, because I think, you know, it's been often a lot of hard decisions at times, right? That we've talked about. You feel like there's no answer that really is going to make everyone happy, and often it's you know, leading by what you think might be the best of solutions that none of which are perfect. And so I think the board has to lead courageously during this time, and that's what I've seen. Thank you.
next up, we have reports. Contrary to the printed agenda, it's principal reports this week. So we'll start with Kristen.
Thank you. Before I launch into my very last board report, I want to just echo what Brian and Meredith said. And Meredith, it was great having you down there yesterday. The kids, it was fun. They have a new appreciation for what the superintendent does for a job. So it was great to have you down there. So thank you. And thank you to the board for all of your support over the last 2 years. I do appreciate all of it. So thank you. So now, as I get ready and going on this, so we did make a shift. I know that the first thing I had talked about was the Asa Water Slide Fund. We did make a shift looking at the weather, and we thank our families for being so willing to shift as well. Looking at the weather, today was the day to have the water slide, and it was perfect. Oh my gosh, and obviously I went down quite a few times. But it was just great, and the kids were wonderful, and just the excitement and the way that, you know, just everybody just loves being there and doing it together. It's just a great way to wrap up this week anyway. We've got more fun planned. Like I have in my report, we've got a lot of fun things happening. Thursday night, we're super excited to be having the Asa Talent Show. Asa's got talent. We really do. And so we're going to be showcasing that at the Performing Arts Center. So we're looking forward to that. Friday, we celebrate our 5th graders, and we say goodbye with our slideshow, and we have some festivities planned, some field day activities to do with them as well. And then next Monday, we have the rest of our school. We do our Asa field day, and we will have our barbecue as usual. And then we're going to finish off the day with the Asa lip sync battle. So that should be a lot of fun stuff. Prior to all of this fun things, we've also had some amazing musical opportunities. We enjoyed Mr. Henry bringing down the concert choir from the high school, and the kids were so amazing. And we had a conversation around the fact that they have not been in a large presentation such as this in almost 2 years. And it was just, for them to just come right in, they sat right down. It was wonderful. I was so, so proud of all of them. And they loved the music and they were cheering on the high school friends. It was fantastic. Enjoyed all of that. And then the next day, Mr. Caballero had his 4th and 5th grade strings, beginner strings come out and do some presentation for our kiddos, and the kids loved it. One of the kindergartners, I said, they were walking by me, I said, "Did you enjoy it?" And they said, "It was magical." Straight from a kindergartner. So that was awesome. Mr. Henry also invited David Wida to play the Great Highland Bagpipes, which was really neat. They loved that as well. And some of you may have seen on Channel 5 or Channel 7, Asa Adams, as I had mentioned before, we won the Invest in Me in Maine Reads giveaway. We got a collection of books and we had an author visit. Mary Beth Bolts, she wrote the story Those Shoes, and it's about this little one that really would love these shoes, but they cost way more than what they have budgeted, and the different ways that he could appreciate the shoes, but then give back to others. It's a beautiful story, and she read it to the kiddos, and then they asked questions, and it was a fantastic, and we appreciate all the work that came from that. Miss Oldenburg had a poetry. They went out and they hung poems throughout the trees out on the playground. It was great. You got to enjoy that. And our school-wide book reading of Charlotte's Web wrapped up after a few months, and every family got a copy of Charlotte's Web courtesy of the Orono Education Association and the Burt McKenzie Fund. And we truly appreciate that. And we've had a lot of families say thank you so much for that. And let's see, our enrollment continues to grow. 2 friends came back, and so we're up to 317 at ASA. And let's see, I guess that's about it. And we'll be doing some student data updates at the June 15th data meeting.
Great. Any questions?
Exciting times.
Yeah, very exciting times at ASA. Yeah, I know you're still around for a little bit, but just would like to say thank you, Kristen. You showed up with COVID, which was the worst possible time to show up, and you had a positive attitude, and you made very strong connections with the students and the community and the teachers, and you'll be missed. So thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, Richard.
Thank you. Thank you all. And I want to echo your words, Brian. I've had the pleasure of working with Kristen in 2 districts now, and I wish you well, Kristen. It's always fun when we get to work together. So at OMS, it's like Kristen said, it's really, really nice to be able to bring people together again. We had a couple of assemblies recently, like good old fashioned assemblies, and it was just spectacular. It just gave me a good feeling. And so I say that because our 8th grade recognition ceremony is on this coming Monday, June 13th, and we're having it in the new Performing Arts Center. I get to walk down there and learn with Cami Carter about lights and sound and everything tomorrow. So excited about that, and the planning is underway for that, and have a real send-off, a good send-off for our 8th graders on June 13th. And our 5th grade step-up night was another example. I shared a picture in the board report of all the families in our middle school gym, and that was a nice, again, it felt like like old times again, and having people in and meeting people. So that was a nice welcome for our 5th graders and 6th graders just recently. And we did a lot of work this year on Chapter 104 programming and planning for next year. And so I think some of the culmination of all that work is that our new course for 8th graders, writing across the disciplines, is in place. We accepted student applications. It was any student who wanted to apply could. And then we met with a committee of teachers and myself, Katie Quirk, and we reviewed applications. I think we had 9 or 10 students that are signed up for the course. So things are in place for that, and that's built into our schedule, period 6 for next year. So we're excited about that. And other kind of acceleration options that we're looking at expanding next year are science fair. And again, I give Katie Quirk a lot of credit for taking a group of kids to the science fair. I shared out information in one of the recent parent newsletters, but we had a lot of success there. And so we're looking in collaboration with OMS science teachers to expand science fair participation next year. So that's in process and planning. Our 2 arts workshops offered to students. We have one on painting and one on sculpture. Those are well attended by students, and they're very enthusiastic about it. So we're looking to offer 4 workshops, 1 each quarter next year to continue offer to continue as part of our acceleration and programming options for students with diverse interests. Let's see, our spring assessments, recently we completed the state science assessment with 8th graders a couple weeks back, and we just recently completed the NWA assessment. So those went, Jason here helped us with some tech supports, and it went off with few snags. So very pleased, and we might have 1 or 2 makeups to do, but we're pretty much finished with that. So that went very well. And a shout out to our OMS Performing Arts. We have the musical Schoolhouse Rock in the Performing Arts Center. That's going on Friday night, 6 p.m. and Saturday, 2 performances, 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. And so those students are working hard at that. And our OMS athletics wraps up this week. Very proud to note that we had our softball team did very well, and I think they're runner-up or 3rd place in the sportsmanship. Our baseball team won the sportsmanship, and they're playing in the Penobscot Valley Middle League Championship game. Weather pending, game is tomorrow, and I think Friday is the makeup day on that. So there's some good success there. And our track and field team, a shout out to them. I don't have any stats or anything on that, but we wrapped up with the Allenquist Invitational recently in Old Town. So very good spring sports season. And that's what I have for tonight.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Okay, high school, Sam or Meredith?
Yeah, sure. I'll start. Just as everyone has said, the spring is always a really busy but very exciting, fun time, and at the high school, it's no different. We have had a lot of fundraising events that were ideas or visions pre-pandemic that were able to actually come to fruition, and so a lot of people were able to enjoy them. One of those was the first annual, so it is going to be repeating, where Heather Holmes, who is the 10th grade class advisor this year, so next year will be the 11th grade class, held an annual cornhole tournament on Sunday, the 22nd. It was an enormous success. They made well over $1,000. They were really a lot of fun had by the kids and the people that participated, including a lot of staff like myself and Meredith Diamond were there competing, and I didn't do so well. She did better than I did, but anyway, so it was a lot of good fun, and we look forward to things like that next year. Scenes and Songs production was amazing. It was the kind of soft opener to the PAC, and just the talent of the students and the dedication of the students, and Cammie Carter and Daniel Perkins and others that helped pull that off. It was just phenomenal. And it was really an exciting way to see what that space can be used for in the future, including, as he mentioned, some things this week. But it was just great to see the kids up there singing and dancing and doing their thing. It was really great. Congratulations to the following students for representing OHS at the All-State Music Festival. It was Zane Rogenbach for trombone, Dina Saucier for violin, Emily Fair for violin, and Anna Malloy for violin. That's a huge honor, and from what I'm told, they were phenomenal at the event, and really enjoyed getting an opportunity to meet other people that play their instruments and network in that way. The prom was awesome. It was a couple weekends ago, or was it last weekend? You know, it was a couple weekends ago, sorry. Or Memorial Day weekend. It was phenomenal in the sense that the weather was iffy for us. And so the kids and the staff, which was Margie Innes and Erica Dixon, pretty much running it, really decided to try to risk it. And it was amazing. Like the rain cleared and it was a beautiful night and the kids had a phenomenal time. They all behaved wonderfully, and the pictures were done by Peter Buhner, which we just want to do a shout out and thanks to him. It was just an amazing evening. So the kids really had a good time coming together and just enjoying each other and having a fun night. To sports as well, we actually have some teams currently playing or possibly are finished by now, but we are kind of wrapping up our seasons as well. Congratulations to the girls and boys tennis teams. The girls teams are actually playing today, but they did upset MCI on Saturday. So that was a big win for them and they moved on to play today. The boys tennis team did end their season last Saturday in the semifinals versus GSA, but both teams did an amazing job this season. Really, I've been told by the coaches really improved as individuals, but as a team really came together and had a good season. So that was very, very good thing for all of them. The track team had an amazing season well that ended last Saturday. Both the girls and boys teams captured the PVC small school track and field championships this a couple weeks ago, and then the freshman track team last week got the Hammond Academy, and the boys won with 87 points, outlasting Brewer by 2, and a lot of individuals beat their own personal records, or even some state records were beaten. And also on Saturday this past week, the boys and girls team both earned Class C state runner-up titles. So outstanding performances by all the athletes, really coming together. Track is one where you really do support each other and your own individual accomplishments, but also as a team. And congratulations to Coach Libby, who was selected by his peers as a PVC Boys Coach of the Year. So that's a huge honor, and congratulations to him and his work with the teams. The learning environment, we just really want to thank everyone once again who's helped with getting the PAC open this spring. You know, Cammie Carter, Callan Barton, Melissa Barton have really helped us to be able to put on a lot of these performances and awards opportunities for having these weeks. So we really appreciate that. And we also would like to take the opportunity to thank Bill Cody, Ben Jacobson, and Jason Burgess for their support in all that it is to get our end of years planning done. It's a lot, it's little details, and those three have been huge supports of us and to help us get it done to celebrate our students.
For my section of the report, I'm going to go a little bit off script. I am a big picture thinker, and it isn't lost on me that we're just about a year out from this moment when we were at a crossroads with respect to leadership at Orono High School. And you know, as somebody who's done a lot of research on the subject of school leadership and the impact that it has, you know, that moment was not lost on me in terms of the potential consequences of it. And I just want to seize the opportunity of this, my last board report of the 21-22 school year, to acknowledge the tremendous joy that it has been to work with Sam Ronco. You know, I think Meredith has said time and again that, you know, the success of this, you know, unique leadership model really hinges on the ability of the two people in the position to work together. And, you know, Sam and I were essentially invited to the table as, you know, relative strangers to one another, you know, because our first year, or my first year in the district, was characterized by, you know, meetings on Zoom and in a way that really wasn't, didn't lend itself to, you know, building connections. But we came to the table together and with the shared goal of serving Orono High School to the absolute best of our abilities. And, you know, one could look back on this year and say that this has been a year of too much change at Orono High School. And, you know, there's too much that is different from how it was before. But, you know, I think that what I can say confidently, what I think Sam can say as well, is that each one of those changes is something that was brought to us as an opportunity by someone who wanted to see something done, who maybe had lamented the fact that it was something that hadn't been noticed or hadn't been addressed, or an opportunity that hadn't been seized yet. And Sam's commitment to this community, to the students in this district, and to the power that schools have to change kids' lives, allowed us to work together to put everything we could into that. And I am grateful to this board for offering us this opportunity. I'm grateful to you, Meredith, for your support and belief in us. And I am grateful to the open door of every person in Orono High School who allowed us to have the conversations that we had to have to figure out where the opportunities were, so that we could begin doing the work of digging in and trying to do better. And I'm grateful to you, Sam. It has been amazing, and I hope that we continue to live up to the tremendous promise of this district and this community.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, superintendent's report.
A few things that aren't on the agenda. We've talked a couple of months ago about the idea of the girls' cooperative hockey team. We're at a point now where they're asking us, it came through my email today, that they're ready for us to either, say we're formally in or not. I indicated to them that we would need to do that at our next meeting. I think we need to put it on an agenda and have a, some notice of that discussion. The information I've received is that 4 other schools are formally in, 1 other is still discussing with board, and then us. So there, if we join, there will be for sure 5, maybe 6 schools in the cooperative team. Brewer would be the lead. Nothing has changed financially. It was around 50,000 when I showed you the information, or when we talked about it before. It's still showing a $50,000 commitment for the entire cooperative. So this divided 5 ways, it's around 10,000. If it's divided 6 ways, I didn't do the math, but what, 80
Less.
yeah, 8,500 or so. I don't know. So Mike Archer indicated he knows there are 2 girls right now who've already said definitely interested, maybe a 3rd. That was less than I think I heard might have been interested before when we talked about it, but I think nonetheless, it's worth us talking as a group and deciding, are we moving this direction or not? We do have the money in our budget that we had been dedicating toward the Old Town Swim cooperative for girls. And we do not have any students in the pipeline for that for next year. And it's a little uncertain beyond that. So we've told Old Town we're not going to be participating with them next year. So there is money to just reallocate to that already in the budget. But it does kind of raise the question of, we have some swimmers in the feeder program for that, that might potentially come into a high school swim program. But what we've been seeing is that students coming out of some of those feeder programs for swim lately have been choosing other sports once they hit high school. I don't know if it's the idea of a cooperative team, it's just not as appealing to them. They want to maybe join a team that's a full, Orono High School team with the kids are in class with every day and see it around school. I don't know what's impacting that. But right now the fact is we don't have anyone next year who indicated in step up day signups or currently planning to swim next year. So we do have funds next year to try out the cooperative team in hockey if we chose to do so. So I just want to give you a heads up that this is going to be on next meeting's agenda. I'll ask Mike to be here so he can answer any other questions. I think it's something that we've been asked for a number of years to support from a small group of families who were interested in this opportunity for their student. And the only option for them was to participate on the boys hockey team that, for our district anyway. And that just hasn't been a good fit for them. They, have either dropped out of the team, just doing club travel kind of teams instead. And so we talked a little bit about that last meeting. So I do think this has been something a long time coming, and I think a cooperative team is really the only way that any of the schools considering or that have joined and like us can offer this kind of program through a cooperative. So do you have any questions or feedback or information that would be helpful for us to bring next time as we discuss this formally?
I know you said there's 2 females that are certain that they're gonna participate. Are we, do we have feelers out to others, or were they not sure, or definite no's, or?
I
'Cause
think
you're right,
that's
it
all I
seems like
got.
It's a lot less than what it was the last time we spoke.
I know. I don't have more information. I know there's one other that is kind of deciding right now, because I think they've joined another team here and trying to decide now, do I go over to what was, my original interest? So I don't know if there are others potentially, but I'll ask Mike to be prepared to share that.
Is this a 1-year decision, or is it sort of like if we were to do it and we'd have this students on, we kind of need to keep going, like is that?
I think that ideally, if I was Brewer,
Yeah.
who's kind of taking responsibility for starting it, I would hope for more than a 1-year commitment from a partnering school. But I think, we have to continually look at how we're using resources and how many students are in a program, and if there's another program that needs those resources. And so I think we have flexibility. I don't want to go into it saying, well, we'll just pull the plug after year 1 if, we have more swimmers over here. But that's ultimately something that the board would need to decide. Mike can add some more nuance to that certainly than I have. I don't know if there anything in the agreement. I don't think there's anything that we would be signing that says we're signing on for a number of years specifically, other than right now.
Is there a certain number of students that have to be interested for this to float, or do they all participate on it? Is it a single team that these 5 or 6 towns are forming?
That's right.
All right.
Yes. So across those towns, there would be enough to have this one team.
Right.
So if you think of anything you'd like us to bring, certainly just shoot me an email so I can let Mike know to bring that information. Last meeting, I mentioned or referenced the email that I forwarded you from Bill that highlighted the abatement plan for our lead water findings. As Bill's here tonight, I wanted to see if you had any questions for him, or if there's any additional information that he could provide to answer questions. I don't know when the group is scheduled to come in and do their work. There might be something to add.
Just got the call right after you sent me that email. June 28th, they'll be here to do the abatement.
So that's, when the planned work is happening. We were still waiting on the follow-up test results though, and we still are. Is that right?
They're still waiting.
So we sent in all of the ones that came back with a positive result for a retest, plus we sent in.
I missed a couple. I think it's
Yeah,
about
a
6 or
handful.
7 of them. And
Right.
so we resent those back in. Still haven't heard back.
There's just one area that we felt like we needed to add another water supply, so students had access, or easy access to water, and that was down at Asa in the 1st and 2nd grade wing. They just didn't have a water bottle filling station nearby like the other end of the building does, so we added a portable water cooler down there that we just put water bottles on. But everywhere else has good access to drinking water, so we didn't have to do anything to get by.
So can I guess I'm not fully clear on the history. I mean, I watched the board meeting, I wasn't here, but in terms of why this got triggered now, do we do regular testing, or was this the first time we tested, or like?
It was a new statute that came into effect this year, that all schools had to do lead testing. We haven't done lead testing since I've been here. I don't know if it had been done. There was no requirement for schools to do it. So you know,
I get-
we hadn't been doing it. We had no indication that, you know, up to this point that there was a problem, and so we had not done the testing.
I guess I'm just like moving into a house, like I test the waters, I like test the paint, I test the soil, and I guess I just sort of wonder broadly, like, I understand statute, there's maybe no legal requirement, but my question generally is, are there things we morally maybe could be testing that we, is what this brings up?
Welcome your feedback if there are other things that aren't on our radar. I mean, honestly, you know, it's not, this building wasn't new to us, so, you know,
Yeah,
unless there's something that suggests a problem, it wasn't on at least my radar. I don't think it was on the previous facilities director radar. I think for most schools, it wasn't something that was done routinely. Sadly, I just don't know enough about it. I did not know enough about this to know that maybe this is something I should be thinking about in our schools. But, you know, I think the statute went into effect for a reason, to bring it to the attention of schools. And, you know, sometimes they do that with a hammer, like this one, you know, everyone shall do this by this date. And so it compelled everyone to have the testing. They supported it by paying for the testing. They're not supporting the abatement. That's up to schools to pay for, but they supported the cost of testing.
I'm like, sometime it might be worth sitting down and just thinking about that conversation.
Sounds like a great topic for the wellness committee.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, I think that's a great idea. Also, we have a committee that's on, you know, building safety and health, like facility health. And so those are places that we can talk through issues. You know, as Bill brings his expertise into our district and, you know, goes to trainings, he may hear of other opportunities for us to, you know, do more preventative testing or maintenance to buildings. So certainly if there are ideas from the board, you can email Bill or I about those ideas or questions. So we're more than open to looking into things. And, you know, I guess when I looked at our results compared to others, it didn't feel quite as alarming. But I think ours luckily seemed to be able to be fixed with fixture-based approaches. So that really tells me that the scope of the issue was not as extreme as maybe some other places have been finding. So that's a positive thing.
Pretty much internal. We're gonna be putting filters on every device that came above 4.0. So they'll be basically filters. We put filters in place.
I mean, no, just to kind of respond to your analogy, buying a home, I mean, it is different because we didn't buy these, right, these buildings have all been here for at least 40 years, so there's no newness to it, but right, typically when I think of a home, you do a lead test, you do an asbestos test, and you do a radon test. Right, radon's not particularly relevant because we don't have the basements. Not to mention our ventilation is really high. And the asbestos, I think there is asbestos in these schools. I think we have a pretty good handle at this point where it is. And, you know, there's pretty strong laws about anytime you do construction, disturb the asbestos, about treating it proactively. So, you know, we do have asbestos, but I think we have a pretty good handle on where it is. And safety, for example, by and large, these tiles don't have asbestos, but sometimes the glue underneath the tiles has asbestos. So it's not something you go and disturb, you just until you do construction and you deal with it. But I hope, you know, like Meredith said, if people have ideas, we should think about other things too.
I also wanted to provide a little bit of a facilities update here to just remind everyone of the work that's happening this summer. Bill scheduled the Asa siding replacement project that's happening almost as soon as school's out. They're going to get started with that. The roof repairs that we kind of prioritized for this summer. Remember, we talked about the list of all the repairs that we want to do into the future. And so we're starting with the OHS OMS kitchen cafeteria, and some small areas down at Asa to fix a transition point really between buildings where there was an identified problem.
And the high school.
And the two-story wing at the high school, like.
And they're all scheduled.
Um,
Can't remember the library we said was next summer.
Right, we're planning on doing the library in concert with hopefully the renovation project for inside the library, doing those simultaneous. We also, speaking of that, we have 4 projects that we're currently working with architect engineer to plan for, including this space being renovated, updated. The concessions restroom building for the back fields area, the old Asa kitchen and one adjacent kind of closet there to renovate those for instructional spaces. And then renovating the old, what will be the former band room area when the band program moves. And restructuring where adult ed is located to move the whole central office into that. And we will get rid of the 40-year-old temporary portable out here. And then I also, we're working on the ventilation project for the Asa wing. That's the first, second grade wing of Asa. We talked about that, I think March-ish. We talked with you guys about that. And working with Honeywell. Right now they're in a phase where they're working on some design to bring back to us. And the SREF application, that's a small portion of that, and the balance of that project will be paid with ESSER funds. But the SREF application, we're getting finalized to sign on the dotted line for state revolving renovation loan. That's about, I think, 180,000 around that for supporting that project. And then something that I have not talked about with you, but I wanted to let you know, this summer, our lease on the portables is up. We had planned to keep those for 2 years to bridge ASA's major construction project. And we are getting rid of the large portable. In assessing ASA space needs, we really need to keep that back portable until this project of renovating the kitchen and the other space beside the kitchen is done. We're just stretched to capacity there. So keeping that back portable allows us to have a couple of different smaller program elements out there for the coming year until we can relieve some pressure and get those other spaces done in the kitchen and adjacent to the kitchen. And so, you know, that's not what I'd hoped, but it's what I really think. And after talking with Kristen and Lisa about where things fit, it's just, you know, difficult to figure out how to fit the puzzle pieces together next year without that. It's not a great space because, you know, you got to walk kids out and the door locks. And so it's the right kind of program has to go in there. Similar to what we had in there before. It was something that, you know, maybe students are escorted to this program and aren't just walking independently to this program. So that will help us have enough space at ASA next year, keeping that. So, any questions?
Has anybody heard anything about major school construction? We've been hitting the SRF for a couple of years, but you know, people know we set the middle school target for that. And
yeah, the only thing I heard recently was at a Drummond Woodson webinar, and someone was talking about it and felt like it wouldn't come up for the next year or so because they just haven't made much headway on their current list that they have only had in place for, I don't know, 5 or so years now. I think COVID slowed things down somewhat.
yeah, that's right. It's rotating, replenish the funds when the building is finished.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it was just speculation though.
Yeah.
And I think that's all I had for my report.
Okay. Any questions or comments? On to the COVID discussion.
I put in the board folder the priority notice that came out. Or, yes, it was priority notice. I don't see the date, in the last week or so. From the commissioner indicating the plan for moving forward. Do you have that in your folder? Okay. So basically, it's another step forward with the state. Shifting away from the COVID protocols that were state developed and instead into either long-standing state protocols for infectious disease response or the CDC, federal CDC guidance for COVID specifically. And so this document indicates that SOP will be retired at the end of this school year. And they've given us kind of the guidance that we would follow in terms of making local decisions about infectious disease response to the same kinds of framework we had before with a flu outbreak, or, you know, when the bird flu and other pandemic or other, you know, infectious disease outbreaks were happening in schools. And then also the federal CDC. And when you look at the federal CDC guidance, it hasn't changed recently much that I can tell at all. I mean, I think on the website it does suggest there's been an update recently, but it's not substantial that I could find. And so that's the guidance that we'll have moving forward. Brian and I talked about this guidance, especially in light of, Noah, you asked a question in the last meeting, kind of where are we headed next year? What kind of guidance will we have? What will we be using? And so Brian and I, looked at this and talked about this and have begun thinking about a framework that we can have in place. So there's something that will give people some information about our plan, but really it would mimic really what's happening right now in our schools, like the phase we are in right now for moving forward. And so that's something that Brian worked on a draft. I've looked at it, and we plan on kind of beginning to share that with stakeholder groups to get some feedback, so that, we have a document out there so that people know, and that we have a guiding kind of written plan for how we plan to open the school year. But as always, it's subject to change, right? Because like last summer, we dismissed school thinking one thing, and by early fall, we were in a different game altogether. So I think that just has to be the ongoing recognition of where we are. But the state is clearly trying to get out of the business of directing local districts around. I mean, that's just another step for that. Brian, would you add anything to that or our discussions?
No, I mean, I think we were gonna bring that to the board next time, right? With, plenty of time to preview it before then.
Yeah.
So,
do you have any other thoughts, questions on this? Any other COVID related?
okay,
To be continued next meeting.
now we come back to the goals discussion. So we had the, all stakeholders participating. This is where, again, the process is, I would like to at least, get a pretty clear direction of where the board wants to head. We don't have to do the last nth degree of wordsmithing. I can do a little bit of that, but I would like to get a pretty clear idea of where the board's headed. And then, we'll have a draft version that we can put out there for people to look at and give feedback for 2 weeks, and then to adopt them at the meeting in 2 weeks. So I'm just going to share. So we went through a more comprehensive process where we talked about the larger landscape of the schools, but strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats. But these were in a brainstorming context, not to say that we're going to do all these, the goals that kind of came forward. Now I think comes the hard part, which is I think we need to, we have too many. So I think we need to group and or prioritize. And I'm always, we've really, as I said, transitioned from these goals are sort of hand wavy things to things where we really expect action, significant action to happen that year. So I guess I kind of keep that framing, and in particular, I'm not a big fan of grouping things just to say that we got it down to one item. If it's actually 3 items, it would take 3 items worth of work to do. So, in my mind, we're probably looking more at prioritizing and cutting, but in general, we just want to be really mindful and coordinate with the administrators about what they think is realistic to pull off next year. That said, I think maybe there's some more synergies between some of these items than there have been in past years. Curriculum and DEI and COVID recovery all, I don't know, may have at least 50% overlap. Just to pull a number off the top of my head, but they have overlap. So, and the other thing to say is just because we don't make it one of our goals doesn't mean that it's not happening, right? So, for example, monitoring high school schedules, I personally would argue that shouldn't be a goal for this year. It's not a big front and center, significant resources kind of thing. But I certainly, hope and expect now that that conversation is open, that it doesn't take 10 years before we revisit the schedule, and in particular around views. We made a pretty public commitment to kind of checking in how that's working. So in my mind, that's something we can continue to monitor without making it a goal explicitly. But different people may. So the goal is to kind of really get it down to the 4, 5, 6 really big high energy priorities and pushes for the year. So, and we have 11 items. So we definitely have too much here. If they want to put a candidate out for absolute must be in the list, tippy top priority.
I mean, from my perspective, I think the thing I'm a little most excited about, or I don't know where we could go with, but the outdoor education piece for me feels like a piece that in this moment, in the restructuring and in the way things have happened, feels, I don't know if there's the energy here, but for me, more broadly, it feels like something that we could formulate plans around and see movement on. And a lot of the other things I'm interested in are maybe more broad conversations, but in this post sort of for COVID kind of moment where things are restructuring, that's something that I've heard that a number of times from the community in different ways. So for me, that would be the one thing that I would love to see happen. But
Can you tell me a little bit more, maybe what you envision? And I guess what I'm thinking is middle of winter, right? So are you envisioning outdoor spaces that we utilize whenever the weather permits, or what are your thoughts on it?
well, I think
And I know you have some experience with this from.
yeah, I think it's I mean, that's part of the conversation, right? But certainly some of it is building out sort of forest classroom spaces, so Ms. Oldenburg uses a forest classroom, and there are other folks that do that too. So some of it is sort of building out the spaces or building out the sort of outdoor facilities, perhaps. I don't even know what's possible. That's part of it. Some of it is looking at curriculum and ways to more engage, like the greenhouse or the farm, or the sort of outdoor spaces that we do have. And yeah, I think there's a lot of nuance and different ways to do it, and a lot of different school models that have used it in Maine all the way south, so with winners and not winners. But I don't know, it seems like there's a lot of at different level, at all levels, different sort of ways to do it. I know I'm being vague, but I think that's part of the conversation, I guess. So
Could you envision that as part of the larger curriculum discussion, or does that have to be a standalone item?
I guess, I mean, it doesn't have to be anything, I guess.
I mean, it could connect to, part of if it were an item or a goal, it could connect to those educators and administrators that are already working on this. You mentioned Ms. Oldenburg. I know also Ms. Neville. I mean, these are the teachers we have. Our kids have, has Forest Fridays.
Yeah.
And so I'd be interested to see what educators are already doing this work and who wants to do more, or in what ways, or thinking back to the capacity concerns, who has the capacity, the desire, what resources would be needed, depending what model, and then kind of connecting to curriculum. In what way does it reinforce other curriculum goals? I can imagine it being pretty integrated.
Yeah, I mean, there's everything from sort of like field trip kind of things, but also just like, I mean, like I walked up to Old Town's like new playground area out there and all the sort of outdoor parks that they have. And, it seems like there's, opportunities in a lot of different ways to integrate that at different levels, so.
Kind of like what Kevin said, I wonder if the first step is not just to inventory what we're doing already,
Yeah,
in which case, I mean, that strikes me as the first step is to just do an inventory. At that point, I'll be honest, I like outdoor education. I think we should, get some traction on it. And I think an inventory would be a first step. I don't know if I can put that as a tippy top priority of COVID or DEI or some of those kinds of things. So to me, I might encourage us to think about just starting to inventory what we're already doing.
so not having it as a goal, but
Not to put it as a goal this year, which is not to say it couldn't become a goal later, but
yeah.
Well, I think to Brian's point, the things that are our goals are the things that we expect to put a lot of resources into, and I just don't know if we're in a position to put a lot of resources into something like that until we've inventoried what we have and what we're doing and so forth.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of for me, like starting and how do we start and continuing that momentum that like, having come in here, I've heard a lot of people say something was starting to happen pre-COVID and there was some thought, I don't even know, but like I've heard from a number of different people in the community saying like, we thought we were moving this direction and then it didn't happen and we wanted this to happen. And
Well, it was really COVID that started some work in this direction, and the summer that Meredith arrived in district, and a lot of resources were put toward that. I don't have the number in my head, but we really worked hard to try to set up outdoor spaces. Kim Oldenburg was a primary person who went to some training, and we brought in some training. And I think there are people who really connected with the idea and have continued doing that, and then others have not. And so I guess it would be good to assess where we are for people who haven't continued with it. Why? Why did you stop? So I think there are lots of questions that we should ask just to gauge where we are with it, because I think there was some excitement, and I think it was for some people fueled by COVID to try to be able to have a healthier class environment where you could do things that maybe you couldn't do indoors.
Hi.
so I'm going to propose that to me, the obvious top two are COVID and DEI. Does anybody disagree that those are things that are just, does anybody think those don't belong on the list?
I don't, I have maybe not quite a procedural question. So things that we'd like things that we're interested in, but not at the goal level, what is a good way to keep them on the radar? Your recommendations, and this is open to anybody here with more experience than me, which is all of you.
I mean, it's a good question. I think there's a couple of ways. One is we can just trust in our collective memories. I think awards isn't that function, right? Another thing we can do is we typically have some capacity, in particular in October and November, a little bit in September with board meetings. Those meetings are typically shorter. We haven't gotten into budgets. And there's an opportunity to do, a targeted public comment period. We've done that in the past where, in the agenda, there's an explicit topic listed under public comment and do a targeted public comment. We did that on awards last year, and to me, that was kind of a starting step. And I'm gonna kind of hope or suggest that awards make it onto the list for goals this year. So our collective memory is one thing, right?
I think committees also.
Committees, yeah,
is another
right.
place.
I mean, I was sort of joking when I said put that on the wellness committee list, but I was sort of not joking.
Yeah.
right? And we have a number of subcommittees. We have a curriculum subcommittee, a policy subcommittee, a wellness subcommittee. We can create other committees.
DEI subcommittee.
DI, yeah, so those are places where we're not necessarily saying and really that's where technologies have lived for this past year too. It's not necessarily intentional, but that's kind of where it ended up, is there was a technology committee in the district that did some good work on technology. And so to me, these district goals are things that the entire community, administrators, board, parents are all, teachers are all going to put some time and energy into, but a committee is kind of a first step towards that process. And so
Outdoor education with the wellness committee.
I think there's a worse approach than doing that, to say, one of the things the wellness committee is going to do this year is inventory what's already happening.
Or
Yeah.
curriculum, like Tom could suggest it.
Or it could go to the curriculum committee too.
Seems like we fit more there.
Well, the outdoor learning, I think, is particularly well poised to be the project of a committee because of a few factors, one of which is that you have a cohort of people who have done a lot of learning, who are motivated and who are capitalizing on the momentum that they are generating as individuals. Jess Archer is somebody else in the district who has done amazing work with outdoor learning and who is the kind of educator who is going to pursue what is best for kids in a dogged and unrelenting way. And I can imagine her making big things happen on an outdoor learning committee. Another reason is because so we did a lot of digging and idea investigating in the early stages of COVID. And one of the pieces that we bumped up against was the relationship between the school district and the town, and where the boundaries of the town and the district property lie, and where our teachers wanted to locate their outdoor learning. And essentially what we came to is a place where we would need some networking and relationship building to find creative solutions to some of these dilemmas. And that really was a point where we maxed out on district capacity to make those things happen. Having board members on a committee who are willing to put some of their time into making those connections, I think would find little resistance to just the assembly of the pieces that are needed in order to make some of the things happen that we're talking about.
So you're saying on outdoor ed to make it as part of a curriculum committee or its own committee?
Honestly, as someone who's gone rogue with a few committees over the past couple of years, I might suggest an outdoor learning. I think if you were to ask Jess Archer if she wanted to chair an outdoor learning committee, she would say our first meeting is tomorrow. And I think that because as the focus by motivated people, it's easier to get regular engagement. It's easier to have people tasked with doing some of the legwork that's required outside of meetings. And then it would just be a matter of that committee bringing to the board a host of recommendations for the board to consider. And I think that would be an actionable next step versus having it be one facet of, frankly, a lot of work that the curriculum committee is going to have to do next year.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing I think on this too, just kind of Carrie Wyman, I think, stepping in as experience, she said, she wanted to bring to the table. So, yeah.
I think it'd be a great idea to put in a curriculum committee. I could support either a standalone outdoor education, or I could support working it through the wellness committee. But the wellness committee has had many incarnations and flavors over the last 5 years, but some incarnations, I could see that being a productive place.
But she's suggesting its own committee.
But yeah, I said its own committee or the wellness committee. I can see either one of those.
I don't think we need to decide right at this moment how it's gonna look, but I
Yeah.
think these are all good
I know this
ideas.
is a tangent, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's helpful for me.
And, I'll just say, change in education does take multiple years to process. And so this feels like one that's the starting point of the process. Whereas like DEI, right, we had a year of book reading, and then we had a year of audit. And now we're having an implementation plan, and next year we're gonna have a plan. Right, so. Other things, so we had two, COVID recovery and DEI as kind of top priority goals. The next three are repeats. And then the next 5 after that are basically new things. So let's take the repeats. Do we feel like we need to repeat them this year, or can we let them kind of go into ongoing processes? On construction, I could be convinced that it needs to stay there for another year because we're going to talk about a lot, or I could be convinced that we should rewrite the ongoing board responsibility, fundamental board responsibility, to be a little bit more explicit about facilities and, capital improvement. Anybody have another opinion on whether that needs to be on our high profile goal list, or we could make a stronger statement under ongoing responsibilities?
Meredith, didn't you say that your preference would be to see it stay just until we get these self-managed projects seen through?
I think there'll be enough,
One more year.
yeah, deliberation and board discussion, and also energies of the district toward that, and really, financial investment, that I think it should stay for one more year.
My preference would be to have it stay there, maybe even for longer than a year, because I think one of the things that I don't want to see happen is we put all this time and energy and resources into, all these improvements and additions, but we also know there's a lot of areas that we're virtually untouched, right? And we know that we're going to have to deal with those, whether it's through new school construction funds, or continue to budget carefully through capital improvement, or maybe revolving renovation if we can tap in again. So just to make sure that we don't lose sight of that, I would like to keep it there, definitely for this year, but maybe even beyond that. I do think the other two continuing could slide to kind of ongoing concerns. That being said, I remain unconvinced that the changes we made to the high school schedule were the right move. I want to be watching that very carefully next year. I just continue to think that we are not optimizing the high school schedule to best serve our students. I don't think that we've done that since I've been on the board. We've tried a lot and have gotten not very far, to be frank. So I'm okay if it goes to ongoing concern, but it's going to be something at the top of my list for over the course of the next year for sure.
So I guess I would propose that the technology could be something where we do one of these board meetings in October, where, there's a draft statement from the technology committee, and we could get wider stakeholder input, but I'm proposing that it not be a, district-wide focus for the coming year, because I just think the dust is still settling from COVID.
I agree.
I would agree with that.
So I'm gonna move that down, not forgotten, but not a high level priority. In a different sense, I'll move the high school schedule. And, I think that's I agree, Mark. I don't think that's done and finished forever, but I also think it was a really high energy, maybe not at the board level, but it was a really high energy effort with a lot of person hours that went into it.
Which I appreciate.
I think we should let it sit for a year and then come back. So I'm gonna put that down there. Okay, so we have 3 kind of carry forward goals. We have 5 things down here that are new. I don't think we can take us up to 8 goals. So some of these are gonna make the cut this year, and some of them may be things that we have to find either a smaller path or just bring them back next year.
Can you remind me of what we discussed around curriculum? That's not ringing a bell.
So I know the curriculum committee, well, in general, Meredith said we've had curriculum on our list a lot, and there is an intention to do a lot of curriculum work, getting back to the K-12 kinds of discussions, and maybe getting to a written curriculum. Also, one of the things that's going to come out of DEI is a curriculum review. So I think there's a lot of curriculum work to do, whether that is district-wide attention or if that's something that goes through the curriculum committee. I don't know, looking at Meredith, if that's your thoughts on that.
But I mean, on our curriculum committee agenda for this week is another look at essentially a proposed process for ongoing curricular review that is tied to the standards review at the state. And would be essentially a way of us formalizing what we hopefully all understand is best practice with respect to curriculum not being a static standalone, but something that we look at repeatedly, we talk about together, we keep alive within changing context, changing student needs in a way that is easy to fall down the priority list if it isn't something to which, we are committed. And, when I think about the way that this district does policy review, right, and the fact that it is so consistent and so thorough, I think that the hope is that we can bring a similar approach to curricular review. That would be establishing the system. Then it would be a matter of implementation, and implementation would be something that would really only come to fruition over the course of roughly 5 years, which is what we see as the life cycle of the process. So hopefully we can agree on what the system will be and then begin implementing it. And if we're able to do that between now and next year, I think we'll be in a good place.
It's sort of creating a process for systematic ongoing review. So, a 5-year cycle, year 1, we do math, year 2, we do English, I'm just kind of making up the details, but, and then the curriculum committee. And also, I think convening, these sort of K-12 area groups across teachers and matching against the state learning standards as those change, and really working through the curriculum and review, but I think there's still work to. We got close, but not to the point of a written document, right? I would like to have a curriculum that's published on a website. I get asked that by parents all the time. And, like Meredith said, we were really headed down that road, and then COVID hit and everybody's family just disappeared. But I'm thinking this could stay with the curriculum committee. It's the priority for the curriculum committee for the year, but it doesn't have to be a district-wide goal.
Yeah, I think that through the lens of DEI and through the lens of where the high school found deficiencies through NEASC, that's going to take a lot of internal capacity. And so I think in that regard, it should be acknowledged of what a big lift that's going to be, because it's hard to, make time for everything. And so I just feel like it's something that's important to acknowledge just how much time and effort that's going to take. And when people say, well, what the heck are you doing with technology? We've been screaming about, it's like there's this other really big thing that we really are trying to work through. Technology is just an example. We have been working on technology, but I just think it's important to acknowledge all the work there is to do there.
So you're arguing to keep it as a goal, not necessarily because every single.
I just feel like we're
person's gonna
playing
be
catch up
involved,
with it. But the process, I think, once we can get the written curriculum on there and do, have the DEI review of curriculum, that's going to be a pretty in-depth part of it. So I just think it's a big phase of work next year. In addition to this process that Meredith's talking about for review.
So I'm just going to cut to the chase and propose that awards and challenging and stretching all students are the other 2 things we move up into the goals level. What do other people think about that?
I was going to ask Meredith Diamond again about district-wide math instruction, and how does that sit in relation to things like curriculum and or the challenging and stretching of all students?
They all sit nicely next to one another. I guess I feel like anecdotally that math as a discussion across the district has been something that has been has bubbled up in different conversations with a frequency that is not true of other disciplines. Specifically, I've had conversations with Kristen about some folks at Asa who would like to reconsider the use of everyday math as the math programming down there. We had conversations this year about middle school materials, because the current materials are being phased out, and so the online accessibility has become limited. And that brought us into the room with some folks from the Maine Math and Science Alliance talking about, what are the current trends in best practice in math instruction. And essentially it was sort of a loggerhead where our orientation as a district, coupled with the perspectives of some of the middle school math teachers, coupled with these industry level assertions about inquiry specifically in math, brought us to a point of feeling like we don't really know what the best next step is. Things are going really well for us. Maybe we should just keep doing what we're doing for now and then talk about this again later. At the high school, we have, we've had conversations this year about the role of assessment in math instruction in a way that has come up again and again across parts of the high school, that it remains unresolved. We have a cohort right now of ninth graders who are finishing the year in geometry and pre-calculus, which means they're taking calculus next year, which means there are question marks about their math curriculum for 11th and 12th grade. To Brian's point about us really not having come to terms with the achievement levels of students in the district, that's one of the places where it's like, holy cow, what are we offering kids? One option we have for them is the university. That works out well in some circumstances and not in others because of the schedule issue that we've identified. And so I guess I am underscoring math because of the way in which I think that it is an area where we stand to grow a lot if we get some of these things right. And that is directly connected to the question of challenging all students, because of the way in which, looking at our achievement levels in math, we have some students really well poised to launch under the right circumstances. And I think it's a matter of just understanding for us what those right circumstances are.
So what do you see as the core question of the conversation, and who's involved in that conversation as a first step? Is it district wide or is there a subset?
I think it is district wide, because right now we have 3 silos, and we've had some dialogue between them, but the challenge comes with the industry driven expense of making pivots in math instruction, right? It's, in the traditional model, it is a super expensive thing to do. And so as a result, we have sort of 3 different tracks.
But I think it's a subcommittee. I mean, it's not like,
Right.
every teacher in the district's got to.
Oh, yeah,
it's
I
a
misphrased. I
subcommittee.
didn't really
Yeah.
mean district wide. I meant stakeholder wide. Or is it just a group of, for example, teachers?
Wouldn't one possible way to deal with this be if we can come up with a assessment plan and schedule for curriculum to make math the lead, like the first area that gets dealt with?
It could, and I think that part of what I'm bringing to this conversation, maybe I haven't articulated well enough, is that, on the one hand, we have curriculum, we have our programming. But then on the other hand, we have pedagogy and beliefs about best practices for our kids. And
In a discussion that predates your arrival here, we had a lengthy discussion over the years about what constitutes curriculum. We certainly would say that pedagogy is included in curriculum. When we say curriculum, think, at least speaking for Brian and Jake and I can't speak for Kevin and Noah, curriculum is writ large, right? It's not just the material, it's far more than that. And you definitely include pedagogy in the definition that we've been working with here over the last, at least what, Brian, 5, 6 years, if not longer.
Yeah, the conversation was about 7 years old.
Yeah.
so then through that lens, I guess what I would say is that I feel like the lift that needs to happen in math is out of scale from what needs to happen in other disciplines in a way that may challenge a timeline. I think that to get us to the next step in our math instruction in the district, we need to set aside time for math instructors in the district to come together, hash out what they have been doing that has been working, and where are their overlaps, and how does that fit in our district orientation to math instruction.
I think it reminds me of the work we've been doing in Wabanaki, where,
Yes.
you can't just have a couple of meetings a year and figure out this really big piece of curriculum. And so I think that's what we're talking about. And I'm not sure, Wabanaki didn't come on our list, and that's not why we're doing it. I don't think district math curriculum needs to be on this list for us to do the same thing. So I guess,
Is this another committee, standalone committee or ad hoc or?
yeah, I think it is.
If it becomes one, FYI, I would, for obvious reasons, be interested.
Yeah,
Excellent.
absolutely, absolutely.
All right, so I think that's maybe like outdoor education headed towards some sort of a committee discussion response that's, it's not necessarily the board and parents and everything at this point, but I think it is a lot of parallel. Maybe it's not so much we need to do an inventory of partly we need to do an inventory of what we're doing in math, but I think there's some groundwork that needs to be laid about what the questions are, and then maybe a year or two down the road, those questions come, especially once it comes to textbook purchases and things like that. It needs to be a bigger discussion, but
Do you feel like awards and challenging, because there's room to do both of those?
that would be, to be honest, I think there's been work going on awards. I think we should, and it has been, as you noted, it's been at least sort of sitting there for 18 months. I would plead COVID for why it hasn't gone quicker. I understand why people are frustrated that it hasn't gone quicker, but I don't think that's a huge lift. Not the way some of these other topics are. So yeah, that would be my proposal, is that, well, so let me just,
I'm fine with having awards on there, but I'm gonna be perfectly frank. When I look at those 6 items, there's one of which seems not nearly of the same substance as the other 5.
I think it's smaller than the other 5.
I think it's incredibly smaller than the other 5. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Doesn't matter if it's rephrased. Meredith earlier used student recognition. I think is a broader framing.
That was gonna be the next thing I was gonna do, is go through and talk about the wording on this, because the wording can be important too. So right now, you see these 6 goals, right? And then we said committees, outdoor education. Outdoor education and math might be committees. We could potentially have, the board comment period on technology, but not necessarily, do a really heavyweight process this year on technology. Sort of ongoing monitoring on the schedule. So that's what I'm seeing at the moment. Are people seeing this vastly differently? What's that?
And you can delete the last one. if you
The
want.
last one?
I mean, I think that's sort of a nebulous
Keep it,
conversation that can come back around when it's more fully.
yeah, keep it in mind.
Yeah.
A lot of these things, I bring them up 3 times before they actually make a full status. So I would encourage you to keep pushing on the topic, but our bandwidth is still recovering from COVID and construction, quite frankly. Okay, so people happy with the kind of categories I lumped these into? Meredith, you mentioned, the student growth and achievement values. Would you see that as possibly wanting to do a board public comment period or something, maybe a 1-hour workshop for a board meeting this fall?
I don't know.
Or do you think it's too soon? Not better.
I mean, when I think about, I think DEI is so big of the work that we're going to be undertaking. I mean, we're going to have to be really thoughtful about the phasing of the work, because it will just, I think, collapse under lack of, capacity to execute it all. That I see a real need to devote a lot of capacity to that in the fall.
Yeah.
I guess I think at some point in the next year, I think we should revisit that discussion. But I think it's like I see a lot of these as the Venn diagram. There's so much overlap in a lot of these that I think it might be interesting next spring to have another, student growth and achievement kind of open comment period. After we've maybe done more thinking in our total school community around some of these topics, like equity and challenging and stretching of all students, and digging into curriculum again. So I think we need to really kind of dig into some of those topics first before we jump back into that, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. I mean, my overall impression is those values are holding up pretty well. I'm hearing people refer back to them a lot. But I think bringing that up in the context of DEI, and I know the accreditation process, the kind of defining our student too, certainly doesn't hurt to revisit. All right.
Yeah,
So
that would probably be a good context for that kind of values discussion.
So under goals, people happy with the wording, continued recovery and advancement from COVID? Does that kind of capture the place we feel we are with COVID?
I don't know about the word advancement. I understand what you mean. I don't know if advancement is the right word though. Continued recovery.
Innovation?
Response.
Inspired innovation.
Recovery and monitoring.
Well, maybe can you wordsmith these over the next?
I can
and send out-
wordsmith. I
Yeah,
just wanted to get quick, we don't have to
Yeah.
do this in detail. I just wanted to get quick input. Yeah, I agree.
I think
Advancement.
something there,
But there's a concept of more than just deficits, right? There's opportunities in COVID, coming out of COVID too. Implement the action plan for the district and developing ongoing practices. Does that capture people? Board improvement, I think, is a piece of that.
Yeah, I'm okay with that being, even the words board improvement disappearing, as long as if part of those ongoing practices being also board practices and engagement practices with the board.
Yep. Construction, I think we talked through that. We have some major construction to finalize. We need to update our capital improvement plan. And we need to get into the habit of, every, whatever it is, every November, the board talks about the capital improvement plan before we start the budget. So I think that captures it. Curriculum, we probably need to expand this, something like create or establish a regular curriculum review process. We want to capture the piece about written curriculum too.
yeah.
I would say establish and implement, right? I think we're close enough on the establish. We need to take it, actually start putting it into practice.
Okay,
And ensure written curriculum or something.
and publish.
Yeah.
written curriculums.
And I think the middle school is the furthest along in that regard, has something. And Asa has a lot of documents, but they're not really forward facing, they're more internal. And then high school has the most work to do.
Awards intentionality, somebody said student recognition. I don't have.
Yeah, for me, this touches on the core philosophical understanding of pedagogy and what we're doing here. And so it's to me, it's a really big underlying thing. Much of that is acronym, but the awards and pieces like this.
I like the broader framing of recognition. I mean, or just even intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. I fully understand the reason we extrinsically motivate kids. I have kids. At the same time, there's a fair bit of literature on the effects of it. So there's a tension there. I'm not coming off as a never do it or you're bad if you do it, because I definitely do it. But yeah, exploring how that's tied into awards and recognition, the ways that we recognize or how we recognize, and It could be a broad umbrella there. That doesn't have to be just about the pieces of paper that come up once a year. So it could be a large topic, or it could be the extremely narrow topic, right, of, student of the month.
Right. I mean, I guess I'm feeling like we put this up there because we felt like it was a fairly focused topic. I don't disagree that, questions of student motivation and, you could start to bring in grading and assessment and a whole lot of other things of that topic too, but I don't want to open that can of worms this time around.
Well, I think the piece that has been missing for me in this conversation is really soliciting broad input on the topic, because I think we've heard from a group of people who have concerns. And I have maybe just an assumption about that there are people who actually do value the awards that are given, and then there's a group in the middle who probably are interested in learning more about what alternatives there could be, and then there's a group who are concerned. So I think soliciting input that really takes the pulse of the entire school community is an important next step. Internally, we've been examining practices and trying to determine if we feel like there are changes that need to be made to some of the recognition structures we have. Middle and high school, Asa really doesn't have the same frameworks for that the middle and high school has. But I think the piece that has felt missing so far in what we've done is really trying to gather input from a broader group of the school community, or broader school community.
Yeah, I mean, I see two pieces. One is making sure we get input not from the five, kind of conversation we had last time, the 5 people who show up at a board meeting because they feel strongly that really getting a sense of the community, but also I think we need to communicate. I do know that work has happened. We need to communicate that. I don't think most of the community knows that work's happened. So communicating that back out. So I would envision next steps as having, possibly a board comment period, which is accompanied by a survey. And maybe at that board meeting with a comment period, we could also have a reporting on the work that's been done to date on awards. And then I don't know where it goes from there. It kind of depends on what we hear in the survey and everything else, but that's what I would envision as next steps. That match. So it seemed like a reasonable, we could really expand this a lot.
So what's that verbiage look like? I guess is the question.
I wonder if it has something that is explicit about the link between student recognition and the values and culture of the community. Because on one hand, student recognition is about motivating kids and recognizing their excellence, but on another hand, student recognition is in schools is often a ritual and a tradition, and rituals and traditions are a huge part of what makes culture. And what I've heard from community is a sense that we want our rituals and traditions around student recognition to reflect our values as a community.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Well, your wordsmith. I guess the other thing occurring to me too is, especially this bimodal population that we talked about with this high concentration of faculty, and I don't know, so you can correct me, but how many of these kids have a couple of parents with PhDs? So not to diminish their efforts, but it is less surprising. And my 16-year-old stepdaughter, every one of her parents has a graduate degree. There's about a half a dozen between them. So she does well in school. It is because she does her work. It's not a stretch though. It's not surprising. She's got math, geology, anthropology, Spanish, physics. So the homework help umbrella is pretty massive versus a kid who's, parents are a couple of working class individuals who commute to Brewer. I'm sure there are kids like that, but what do awards recognize? And is there any link between just advantages they can't help but have, but advantages that they have? It would be a question I have. It doesn't have to be answered right now, unless you want to.
So I just briefly offer, so Brian, you're correct. There was a committee that I worked with of staff to look at our particularly our student of the month plus our book awards, and we came up with, you know, rubrics and expectations and a different way to get information and nominees from staff that was more equitable, and we were piloting them then this year. And so that's where I think you're right, Brian. We haven't been front facing with that work at this point because we're seeing how this spring goes. A couple months of those processes to then come back and hopefully also get more people, because bandwidth, as Brian mentioned earlier, more people involved in our committee as well than that what was involved earlier this spring with me, to really look at that and then to be front facing with that and to get and to follow through with some of the other suggestions that Brian made. But a lot of what we talked about, Kevin, was that exactly, is, you know, how do we try to ensure that all students have the capability of earning such recognition when their work deserves it, and when their presence in school deserves it, or whatever the word might be. So there has been work done and changes made just this spring at the high school level at least, but we're just wanting to work out the finite details before we try to get more input and put it out there for board feedback and other feedback. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. Sam.
I guess the pieces in here, there's like the DEI piece, there's the community piece, and then there's the piece Kevin brought up, which is the research on education and how it works. And I guess is that piece also being addressed? Like best practices.
We've talked about that in DEI.
Yeah.
You know, that is a part of you know, what we,
Well,
the
I mean,
DEI picture.
I don't mean in terms of DEI research, I mean in terms of pedagogical, intrinsic work, extrinsic work, sort of how what it does in children, right? Like, what talking to you know what I'm saying, right?
I know what you're saying.
The earlier point.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, those conversations don't necessarily, I don't know how much we are using these awards to motivate students in their learning as much as recognizing, you know, I think what you're talking about comes down to a more granular kind of award, but anyway, I don't know that we want to spend a whole lot more time on this tonight. I wrote building a shared understanding of the purpose of an appropriate amount of awards. Does that capture, is that close enough for people? I'm just cognizant we have a whole lot of other things going on tonight.
Yeah.
Challenging and stretching all students. People okay with that language? Okay, so again, we have 6 goals. We are going to expect that somewhere over time, we'll have an outdoor education committee, and I don't know if you saw the chat, but Carrie definitely indicated an interest in that too. And math, those are not necessarily all stakeholder kinds of processes at this moment in time, but starting to lay groundwork. We probably may have board comment periods on the technology plan, on awards, and maybe later in the spring, student growth and achievement values, and high school scheduling, at least for the coming year, is in kind of a monitoring process. Does that work for everybody?
I just think under awards, maybe put student recognition somewhere, or the word student in there. That's just,
Student awards. Yep. Okay, I will clean this up, circulate it to the board in advance, and we'll come to, you know, this is open for public comment for the next 2 weeks, and then the board would vote to actually adopt this at the next, I mean, at least, I don't know, may not adopt the lower part. We traditionally only adopted the goals piece, but at least the goals piece we would vote to adopt at the next meeting. Everybody good to move on from that? I don't want to railroad things, but I also know we have hours that was still. So.
And no cookies to eat.
well, there's another meeting to discuss it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so.
Okay. So next up, we have staff nominations. Meredith, you have a nomination for speech language pathologist.
Yes, I'm recommending Jennifer Mahoney for the full-time speech language pathologist position.
Okay, I'll make a motion and then make a motion to authorize the superintendent to proceed with hiring as nominated. Is there a second?
I will second.
Anybody, we probably should go into executive session, so I'd make a motion to go into executive session under 1 MRSA 4056A appointment of personnel. Is there a second?
And the second that as well.
All those in favor of executive session? Okay. Okay, there's a motion on the floor to approve the nomination. Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, passes 5-0. No co-curricular nominations. We have one policy revision. This is went through the policy committee, and just a couple of tweaks to the policy on public participation at board meetings. As we were talking about during the workshops, some board meetings have gotten excessively exciting, so we just wanted to make sure we had, and those go better when the policies are already in place rather than making things up on the moment. So just wanted to make sure we had a clearly set up policy. So You guys have this in the packet, the changes. So the changes are making it explicit that the only people who are guaranteed the right to public comment are residents of Orono, parents, guardians, or students of the school district and employees of the school district. People who don't fit in those, basically our constituency. If people don't fit in that category, it's the chair's discretion, depending on time, intent, and other things, whether to let those individuals comment. Given Zoom, we thought we should add under D, images, vulgar images are also not acceptable with the Zoom bombing. And then under J, we just thought we should update this to, even though it's not public comment, recognize that these standards apply to chat as well. And if, vulgarity, ad hominem attacks on employees, all these kinds of things are occurring in chat, those are unacceptable, and we have options of either kicking the individual out of the meeting, or as we could in person participants, and or shutting chat down through Zoom. Zoom cannot shut one person down, but we can shut Zoom down completely for chat. Sorry, chat for Zoom. So I would make a motion to approve the revisions to policy BEDH as presented. Is there a second?
I have a second.
I'll just note there's two
Yeah.
periods at the end of J.
Fix that, so we
should,
don't have to do, Mark doesn't have to do that next time we come to policy.
Yeah, other than that change, any other discussion or changes? Okay, all those in favor? Okay. So next up is, this is not a new appointment, but a change in FTEs. You want to introduce this, Meredith?
Yeah, so we showed you some information at our last meeting that highlighted a need that before I was presented with the information, I wasn't really aware that this is how the course requests had shifted. And so, looking at this and thinking about it, and we had Jess, who's on the call tonight, email us to say, hey, here's an idea for how this could be tackled. We've looked at that idea and agree that it's a good idea for how we can tackle that for the coming year. And as long as we continue to see the need. So we have an employee who has a reduced schedule at the middle school. We've looked at the schedule and how it could work, and we can add 2 sections at the high school that fits within this individual schedule to expand them to a full-time employee. And it helps offset both the overload that the high school art teacher has, and adds another section of art to help accommodate some of the, surplus course requests that have not yet been placed into sections. Meredith also indicated when I was talking to her about this, that it also just gives another more scheduling flexibility, because it puts an art class in every class period of the schedule, just to help more students be able to access these courses. So the fiscal impact of this is $19,109. And so just, we think it's a worthwhile investment to be able to do that, to address this need that has been illustrated. Meredith, would you add anything to that?
No, you did a good job.
Yeah, Meredith gave me all the information, so give her credit. So, I think that this is another example of just needing to be flexible, right? With see a need, and is there a way we can solve this need? And I'm really glad that the need came forward in the way that it did, so we could really think about it and consider how to solve it. And it's not a forever, change, because I think, like we've talked about in other ways, there are other times when we see the enrollment fluctuations change. Right now, we're in a really big bubble at the high school. Asa's in a really big bubble. The middle school is kind of in a more typical enrollment phase. So we see enrollment fluctuations happen across the district. So we have to just be responsive to those. And this is what I think we're seeing right now.
So I'd make a motion to authorize the addition of 0.22 FTE to OHS art teaching. Is there a second?
I will second.
And just to be clear, the individual's already in the district, so it's not a hire, and also, the funding would basically come out of contingency, so the budget's already passed, but this is traditionally what the board has done when there's a need to hire after the budget, we just create the FT and, you know, as we discussed, there's contingency and there's also, you know, there's elbow room in the budget. We don't spend every penny of the budget. So any further discussion?
Yeah, I guess I have some questions about, so one, is there a reason to not make it permanent? Or I don't know, maybe this isn't the time we can even do that, but like, I guess, you know.
I think it goes back to how we allocate personnel.
Yeah,
If we don't have the student demand, we don't just keep spending the money in that place. We sometimes divert it to the other place that it's needed in the budget. So
but we don't have other staff that are
We
at
do.
full time.
We do.
That they're at full time, and you might just drop them to 0.8. I mean,
we have other staff that we have hired or changed from, we have another staff going from full-time to part-time next year. So this is how we've operated.
at any time, someone could just drop from 1 to 0.8.
Well, typically, I mean, it doesn't happen as often as maybe you think, unless there is an enrollment bubble we see, and then when we hire, we give someone an indication that that's what we see this position as, and that's what I see this position as. Not something that I can, you know, forecast that far into the future at this point because of what I see in the middle school, unless we get large tuition numbers. The same thing we did at the high school with a half FT for social studies, a half T for English. It was hired with the same need that we see a large bubble coming through. So
Yeah, I mean, we don't take people who are hired at a 1.0 position and then cut them to 0.8. As a normal basis, you know, we have that process, there's a process for doing that if we ever had to budget crisis and needed to do that, but that hasn't happened in my memory in the district. But people who are hired, you know, knowing upfront it's a halftime position or a 0.8 position or whatever.
or
you
to
know,
fill an
that's-
interim need like this.
Yeah, that's a different situation, and in those cases, sometimes they get bumped up, but in those cases, when they're hired at halftime, they may get bumped up, but there's not necessarily a guarantee that that's permanent when they were hired up front and accepted the job at halftime, the 0.8 or whatever it was. I mean, to me, it just goes back to student demand. I don't create positions just to create positions. I create positions to meet student demand, and there's student demand, so we should meet it. And as long as there's student demand, that's great to meet it.
Yeah, and so this arose out of that conversation we had last week, but it would have come here anyway, because I guess I'm sort of trying to understand how these flexible things happen. Like, I mean, we got an email from our conversation last week, that's how I heard about this. But if we hadn't had that whole conversation, this still would have bubbled up and.
You know, sometimes it bubbles up because the high school sees a need in the numbers. And sometimes it bubbles up, you know, in other ways, like this one, because we were comparing something and the high school with schedule, you know, indicated like a footnote on here, we still have 30 students not in the section.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was thinking in the shower the next morning, maybe Tim, I'm sorry, about the same thing, about this, and thinking about, well, gosh, why couldn't we flex that person up? And then I opened the same email you opened. So I think, you know, I think they happen lots of ways. There's not one way this happens.
Sometimes we find things, right? Like the
Yeah.
news is a perfect example, right? We analyzed the high school schedule, or I shouldn't say we, the high school schedule was analyzed and we found something that we
Yeah.
probably wouldn't have found if it wasn't otherwise analyzed.
I guess for me, that's just like, I'm just sort of, what I'm wondering in the back of my head is like, how many other little things like this are we not missing? And is maybe there already is, but some process for like making sure.
I mean, sometimes when we have more demand than we have instructional capacity, we prioritize enrollment and tell the student, you can take that next year. We're going to go to your second or third choice. That's another way we deal with student demand that kind of maybe is more here than we have capacity for. So we deal with it in different ways, but this seemed like a really, you know, flexible way to solve this problem. And so I'm not sure there's one way to solve it. And I think, trying to be leaders who are responsive, we're looking for what needs are. And sometimes we find those, sometimes other people see those and mention them to us. And so those are all good ways to solve, issues that we see.
We do also have a systematic, class sizes across the district are presented to the board in the fall. And so that's another checkpoint.
I guess it's the registration and the now or for next year when it comes up. So it's
Right.
maybe that.
I mean, this came from students filling out forms saying, what class would I like to take? What classes do I want in high school next year?
Yeah.
And putting the schedule together and, it's pretty short amount of turnaround time between the time students put the forms together, the schedule got put together and the need got identified. It's only over a month before we're sitting here, so.
Yeah. So I guess, are there other gaps similar that are like trying to fill?
I'm not aware of any right now.
No, and I think that, it's worth noting that we have a district wherein a teacher feels empowered to raise a concern and say, this is something that deserves attention. And then fast forward 72 hours and suddenly there's, a 0.22, position that's been expanded or expanded by 0.22. And I think that invites reflection by teachers and a willingness to, open conversations and, the conversations don't always end this way, but I am really happy to be in a district where it does because, I've never been in a district that's been so responsive to evolving needs as this one is.
I think it also goes back though to I don't want to plow the same field we've been plowing for 3 meetings, but we've really looked at the music question and we don't see demand. And we've had if you build it, will they come experiment for 5 years and it hasn't resulted in that. Now, will a new teacher result in that? Maybe. And at that point, yes, let's do that. So I hope you see that, we see need and we see a way to solve it. Let's solve it. As opposed to, no, we're fixed. We've got our staff. We're just going to make do. Students, sorry, not going to offer those courses so it's just, it makes sense to do this.
In my experience, something like this not coming to the forefront sooner and being addressed as the exception rather than the rule. One of the things that we've seen regularly over the years is that if a stakeholder group, whether that's teachers or parents, or in some cases even students, see that they're in their view that there's a need for additional instructional capacity or something else, that view gets presented relatively quickly and doesn't always, as Meredith pointed out, doesn't always end up in the same outcome, but it ends up being presented and then carefully considered. The fact that this one was in existence and didn't come up kind of naturally, I think that's the first time I can remember something like this happening. And I don't know that, as Meredith said, I don't know if it would have or wouldn't have came up if we wouldn't have had this music discussion. But this is the first time in however long I've been on the board where there's been this level of unmet student demand that didn't get presented to the board with a request to address that. And so now it has, but it just came about through a little bit of a different process than how it normally comes out. So it doesn't mean that we're not missing other things. I don't think we are, but of course we can't be sure of that, but generally when there's demand, it comes forward. In my experience, at least.
Other discussion? Motion is still on the table. Are we ready to vote? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor? So passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Subcommittee reports. Policy Subcommittee met on Tuesday. We finished the I policies. Sounds really exciting.
It felt really good, actually.
It did feel, we've been stuck in the eyes for like 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
It's a big section and then we kept having other distractions. You'll see two more policies, I believe, come forward in 2 weeks out of that. And then we're off until the fall. We'll start on the J policies, which is a pretty good sized group of students, student policy, student discipline, absenteeism, things like that. And then the K policies or community relations, those are really short. And then we will pause on the review. Probably by that time, we'll have some changes from the legislature to implement, but
I wouldn't be so sure that we're gonna pause on it. You say that like it's certainty, but we could end up getting slowed down on other things and all of a sudden it's time for.
I know, we've got a 3-year cycle, so could be back on the A's. I think UTC we heard is done for the year.
There's one more meeting, but it's at the end of June.
Okay,
So it might be after we stop.
yeah. Spruce was the one that was done
He's
for
done
the
for
year.
the
Yep. Curriculum subcommittee is this Thursday. Quick preview, well, you already previewed discussing a process for curriculum review. Facilities and building committee, Meredith, I think covered most of that.
Well, I didn't talk about the project. We had a meeting last week with architects about the and the engineering or the construction management firm about the ponds and some of the fields and some of the punch list items. And there is work happening. There was a letter of non-conformance issued around the field and the concerns we have around the field. That's just another tool in the chest for compelling action to be taken sooner rather than later on the field. The striping, was the striping done tonight?
Supposed to
They
be.
were starting when I walked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Holding.
So the striping on the parking lot was happening this afternoon, so that can be opened up tomorrow. And Bill's working this week and next week with contractors coming in to finish the sound and light punch list and work to get that going for us. And then they will schedule training for us after that for those components in the auditorium. Anything else, Bill, on that? HVAC, there's another big kind of progress happening around some of the HVAC issues that Bill's been plugging away at, trying to get resolution on with some, problems that he found with the HVAC system. So we're supposed to hear back from them soon on that.
Pricing and
Yeah.
different things. Yeah.
So
The ponds
still a
are,
lot happening.
the ponds are looking a lot better. Mark, was you up there tonight?
I did.
They've got them all leveled out. Looks a lot better.
Yeah, that's good. With all the rain we're gonna get over the next
Be a good test,
4 or
yeah.
5 days, we should get an idea. if it's- if it's
The
going on.
seeding, hopefully the seeding will be taking place within the next week. We're hoping to get some of it done this week, but they don't have the stuff we talked about, Brian, wetland mix. They don't have that yet. So they're still getting that, trying to get that in, get that taken care of as well.
Great.
And on the side projects, roofing and siding are going ahead this summer. We're still value engineering with on the central office and the Asa kitchen. And there is some design, functional analysis for the library that's happening. So those are in early stages, but those are all going on. DEI leadership team, we're meeting again on Thursday. Kind of like I indicated last week, we're got a lot of the groundwork for the DEI action plan laid out, and we got just kind of the detailed level of planning to go. And
We plan on bringing an update to the board at the next meeting to give you wherever we are in the work, to give you an update on the action plan work.
it's close, it may not get done before 2 weeks from now, but it's very close. Any other business? Any requests for future agenda items? We are open for public comment. Is there any public comment? Seeing no public comment, our next board meeting will be
It is the 15th, isn't it?
15th, yeah. The next board meeting will be a data workshop, not a formal board meeting, on June 15th at 4:30 p.m. Here in the library or on Zoom. Our next regular board meeting and the last before summer is June 21st at 6 p.m. Here in the library or on Zoom. Any requests for information or follow-up? Okay, the only remaining items are executive sessions. No other votes will be taken except for adjournment. So people are welcome to sign off if they're not involved in the executive sessions. I would make a motion to go into executive session under 1 MRSI 4056A, discussion of appointment of personnel administrators. Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay,
We're gonna close the Zoom.
we'll go ahead and
Yeah.
close Zoom. Yep. So thank you, everybody on Zoom. And board will meet with Meredith shortly and then she'll start to call.